Hello guys, once again it's Matt, and today we have another video. Let's thank our members Invictus, Crazy Bull, Cots, our patrons Interceptor, Richardson, Danny Cage, and Rupert. Thank you guys, it helps a lot, you have no idea. Make sure to be a sub, make sure to be a Patreon member, PayPal. Thank you all the subscribers and all the members and patrons, and let's get into it. So today we kinda have a diving down series, you know. But it is not a proper normal one that I normally do. It is one that I was actually suggested to do on missiles. So yeah, instead of an aircraft, we are going to talk about a missile today, especially the AIM-9, so the Sidewinder, okay? So it's one of the most used missiles ever. So yeah, I wanted to make a video about the AIM-9 itself. Okay, so let's get into it. So the AIM-9, codename Sidewinder, is one of the most used IR missiles in the world, if not the most used, designed for short-range engagements to help aircraft deal with targets away from the distance of the guns initially, and even in a dogfight eventually. The start of the AIM-9 starts with the reticle seeker technology started being developed in Germany during World War II. It worked creating a signal from a light source using a rotating disc that has different parts to it, leaving some parts to be penetrated by lights and by light, and others don't. And basically the disc is divided 50% having a 50% light penetration, and then the other 50% of the disc has kind of like divided between it. Like 50% of that 50%, you know, like divided. I will leave the image in the screen. It will be parts that penetrate light 100% and others that don't penetrate light 0%. And with that, with the rotating part of the disc, it makes it so that the sensor actually detects a signal and it creates a signal. So with that signal, it actually tries to calculate the distance or the size of the signal strength, or where it is basically, with the size of the signal that it's being detected, right? And with that, it basically produces the signal, and this signal will be used for a computer kind of with a programmed kind of situation there that will tell the ailerons and stuff how to work towards a specific interception point. This is kind of how it works. It's very complex to say just that, and it is hard to actually say this in a language that is not my mother language, but still, I hope you understand kind of. So it basically creates a signal from light, and with that light, it translates to a size of the signal, and that size signal tells the missile where the target is. And with that, because it takes time until the disc rotates to the target, right? So depending on the amount of time that it takes, the signal will be larger or smaller. And with that, it can actually detect where the target is and tells a computer, who tells the ailerons and stuff, where it should go for an interception point. So this is all programmed there. So it's a very complex thing. But very simple at the same time in the way that it works, but it is complex, the whole building process, right, of these type of sensors and computers and stuff. Of course, it has also the rollerons, they're called, which are basically these little, little spinning discs that are in the rear part of the rear kind of empennage of the missile. And they basically have these little thieves that makes them turn while the air is actually hitting them, and with that it makes it a gyroscopic kind of thing, and with that it stabilizes the missile so that it just doesn't roll off completely out of balance. Something that kind of happens sometimes depending on the situation with the SRAM, for example, a missile that doesn't have that. So yeah, it's a very simple fix for a very bad problem in missiles. So yeah, basically this is a very basic explanation on how kind of the missile works, okay? And we're going to talk about every variant now, and then we are going to recap it at last So you know at the end of the video, okay? So let's go for the variants. So we have the AIM-9A. So in the early 50s, they started developing the missile with the idea of creating a very simple air missile equipped with an air-to-air rocket based on the 5-inch Zuni rocket. So the idea was this technology on the nose and then a Zuni rocket on the body of the missile as a rocket with a lead sulfide photocell and like sensor seeker, right? And the use of rollers, as I said before. The first tests were done in 1951, and in 1953, the first drone air-to-air kill was recorded with it. The prototype missile received the designation AIM-9 and General Electric started low-rate production in 1955, and in 1956, it entered full service in the US Navy. Only 240 of these were built, and it is very limited, but the performance is very, very similar to the B. So we are going to get into the B already, and then we talk about the performance of these two missiles because they are very, very similar to each other, okay? Then we have the AIM-9B. It was the next step in development with a more sophisticated rear section and a more aerodynamical, better front fins. Actuators, rocket motors, warhead, and seeker were the same as the A. So it was just a little bit more aerodynamic. You can see that the fins on the nose are a little bit more swept back. The rear part of the missile was a little bit more designed. So it was just a missile, a little bit more of a better aerodynamic AIM-9A, right? So yeah, the performance was basically the same. The USAF was kind of skeptical about using it instead of the AIM-4, but eventually, after a fly-off, they decided that it was better than the AIM-4. But that's kind of even debatable until this day, because there are some pilots that said that the AIM-9 was worse than the AIM-4 in certain situations. But then they say that money probably came into place of the choosing. There's a lot of debate about this, so I'm not gonna say that one of these missiles are better than the other, but the AIM-4 definitely was a pretty alright missile as well. Basically, this was the first mass-produced version, so the AIM-9B, and it was made over 8,000 of them. So yeah, a lot of them were built. The performance of the A and the B were almost identical, as I said. The Mach 1.7 was the speed, so it's a very slow missile, having a track rate of 11 degrees per second, a 20 degrees of gimbal limit at first, and later it was upgraded to 30 degrees, a 10G limit on turns, with a 2G limit recommended for launch. The burn time was 2.2 seconds using the Mark 17. I think it was still the Mark 17. From the get-go, it was already the Mark 17 engine. So 2.2 seconds of burn time, 20 seconds of guidance, and a 9-meter proximity fuse with 7.62 kilograms of TNT equivalent. So this was the initial missile. So it was very low range, 2.2 seconds of burn time, doesn't turn very good. It is susceptible to very amounts of countermeasures and background noise of light. So it was a very bad missile, but it was the first. And this was the missile that was used as a base for the R3S. The R3S is a little bit different, but the base of it was the AIM-9B. The R3S, the R13, these missiles we're going to talk about in another video, okay? But today is just the air-to-air AIM-9s, because there is even like other types of AIM-9s, but the idea was just the air-to-air, IR, and radar AIM-9s, okay? Then after that, this was like late 50s, right? So 1958, 59. So yeah, I mean the A entered in service in 1956, so you could say that the B would probably enter around 1958, 59. And with that, normally they were converted to Bs. Every missile of this type was kind of converted at the end to something else, so there's that as well. But yeah, the AIM-9C and D. The limitations of the B had made the US Navy search for improvements. These are the C and the D variants, so AIM-9C, AIM-9D. with the C being a semi-active radar homing version in 1963, and an IR version around that time came too as the AIM-9D. The improvements were the new Hercules Mark 36 engine. That was a very, very good engine, increased the range and speed of the missile, and improved Mark 48 warhead as well, with slightly larger fins and better aerodynamics. The C was only used in the F-8 Crusader. This was made for the Crusader not to need a new radar, just to use the Sparrow missile. So it was basically a retrofit just to have a semi-active radar homing missile for the Crusader without having to upgrade the radar. But it was not very successful anyway, and they were later converted into the AGM-122A sidearms, which is an anti-radiation missile, which is funny, right? But still. The D variant had a new nitrogen-cooled PBS seeker, which is the lead sulfide, so it has the same type of seeker, but it was nitrogen-cooled. That reduced the heat of the missile, and with that you had more time in battle, more reliability with the missile, so it was just better overall, right? And it had a reduced 2.5 degrees of FOV. 2.5 degrees will be the same for all the missiles from now on, but still. The objective of the reduced FOV was to reduce background noise. It feels weird to have that, reduced FOV being an improvement, but it's just that the gimbal limit needed to be higher, and then you can do whatever you want. Just that the FOV, it was already the idea that a lower FOV would be better against countermeasures, against background noise, against anything like that. It's the problem that you see, for example, an AIM-9J against an R60, for example. The R60 has a larger FOV, so it goes to other stuff a little bit easier, right? It had a higher tracking rate of 12 degrees, and it had around 1,000 of Cs built around 1965 to 1967, and around 1,000 Ds were built around 1965 to 1969. They had an improvement on speed because of the new engine, so Mach 2.5 plus was achieved with a 5-second burn time, so it took a little bit more time to get to speed, but the longer burn time ensured that it had more speed. So yeah, it had more speed and more range. Guidance duration was also increased to 60 seconds, and it had a 5 kilograms TNT equivalent warhead with a 9-meter proximity fuse. The gimbal limit was 40 degrees, so it was an increase. And with the 12 degrees of tracking rate as well, it make the missile turns better as well, okay? And having a nitrogen cooling system for the missile, making it better and more reliable in flight, as I said. The max G was around 18 Gs. So this was the Navy variant, okay? The C and the Ds, they were Navy variants. The USAF never used this missile, so they basically, the USN actually made a missile tailored to them specifically, right? So yeah. Then we have the AIM-9E USAF specific version made to improve the performance of the B as well, but for the USAF. So the USN and the USAF were doing two different designs, okay? It had a new seeker with Peltier cooling and a tracking rate of 12 degrees as well, same as the D. And with the Peltier cooling method, it had an unlimited cooling time while the missile was on the launch rail. So that was a very, very good thing for reliability and for combat in general. You can just use it whatever you want. The AIM-9B had problems and had a limited time once you turned it on, the missile, and off and stuff like that, because of the heating that it produces. So with that, you can just use the missile whatever you want, whenever you want. The main difference is the elongated nose to the new seeker. Everything else is the same. Around 5,000 of Bs were converted to Es, and there was even an E2 variant that had a reduced smoke motor made during the 60s. It was a very, very similar to the B, okay? Having just the seeker and a different, as a different thing compared to the B. So it is a B with a different seeker. That's the E. Okay, everything else is the same. The aerodynamics, the engine, everything else. Which makes you think why we have the same burn time and it was capable of Mach 2.5. It's kind of a weird thing, right? But yeah, the speed was increased. As I said, No idea how, because since the engine is the same, and the aerodynamics is basically the same of the B, and it's even heavier than the B, I don't have any clues on how it managed to go past that speed. So it really doesn't make sense for me, because the aerodynamics is the same, the engine is the same, burn time, everything is the same, but it is capable of Mach 2.5. I don't know if this is just a number that they throw around there, but maybe it is. But I don't know. In game, you can feel the difference between the B and the D, and the E is definitely faster. So it, but I don't know. With the same missile, the same engine, as the B, 2.2 seconds, as I said, 20 degree seconds of guidance as well. Same TNT, same proximity fuse. The only difference that he had a 40 degrees gimbal limit and a seeker of 12 degrees per second of tracking rate instead of the 11 of the B. Everything else is the same. So that's why. The G is everything else is the same. It's a improvement, but it's not as an improvement as the D was from the B, right? Then we have the AIM-9F, also known as the AIM-9B FGW2. It's a German-built version of the B. Around 15,000 of them were built or converted from the Bs. Featured a CO2 cooled seeker and a solid-state electronics, making it more reliable and easier to use in combat. A new nose dome was built, but it was very, very similar to the B. Entered in service in 1969. It had the same, basically everything from the B, despite the new 16 degrees of tracking rate. Burn time, Mach, guidance time, turn, TNT, everything is the same as the B. It is just basically a modernization done by the Germans for the Europeans that use the AIM-9B to make the AIM-9B a little bit more reliable and a little bit better. The missile itself is basically the same, but it's just a modernization of that old missile. Then we go for the 70s. So yeah, this was during the Vietnam War, and we have the AIM-9G. So the AIM-9G was an improvement over the AIM-9D, another Navy variant, okay? It had SIM, which is the Sidewinder expanded acquisition mode, which made to be able to allow it to be slaved to radars or optic systems such as IRSTs or cameras and stuff through a search pattern. So around 2,120 were built from 1970 to 1972, and probably some of them were also converted as well. Had the same engine as the D, so the Mark 36 with a 5-second burn time, so the energy is the same as the D. Same guidance time, same speed, same tracking rate, same gimbal limits, still 18 Gs, same TNT equivalent. The main difference is the ability to be slaved. That's it, okay? So the AIM-9G is the same missile as the D, but with the SIM that makes it be able to be slaved or used in a different way, okay? Then we have the AIM-9H. The AIM-9H is also a further development of the D or the G, right? Still a Navy variant. So it was basically a G with a better reliability. It had some solid-state electronics in the guidance and control systems with a tracking rate of 20 degrees per second. That's the difference. I mean, it has a more powerful actuators as well, which makes it kind of turn a little bit better, but still, basically everything else is the same. Around 3,000 of them were built between 1972 and 74. The new electronics made it take the punch of landing on carriers more easily without breaking. It used solid state or like semiconductors instead of the vacuum tubes, so it was less susceptible to breaking when landing. So the reliability of the H was way better than the G, and it turned a little bit better as well. But everything else, even the seeker is the same as the G. It's just that it had a better computer, so the tracking rate is a little bit better, as I said, with semiconductors. But it was basically the most advanced early AIM-9 that we can see, with the best killing rate of the Vietnam War as well. And it was basically used as the basis for the L, so it was a very, or the Lima, right? So it's a very, very good AIM-9. Had the same engine, proximity fuse, TNT, gimbal limit, G limit than the G and the D, making it better for reliability for the Navy. And obviously had a better tracking rate because of the new electronics as well. So this is the AIM-9 that we see in the F-14, for example, okay? just before the AIM-9L was added. So yeah. Then we have the AIM-9K. The K never existed technically, but it is an upgrade for the H. But it was basically cancelled due to the AIM-9L or the Lima being developed together with the USAF. Okay, so it is a very good. I mean, it was a very good idea, but they cancelled due to the L. It was basically a L, I think, but it was just let's use the stuff that are being used in the L to make another model, right? Then we have the AIM-9J, N, and P. So basically the J initially was an improved E model. It had partial solid state electronics as well. So it is around from 1974. So it had the same time frame as the AIM-9H. So partial solid state electronics, a longer burning gas generator. That doesn't mean more burn time. That means just more energy for the missile. So it increases guidance time. More powerful actuators, which help a lot with the new canards as well, to properly operate the canards, right? And around 10,000 of them were built, mostly converting E's and B's. Had the double the G from the B, right? The E, I mean, due to the new electronics and the canards. And then we had the N, the November, which was a modernization of the J with better solid state electronics with an improved seeker performance as well. And then we had the P, which also was a J, but for less demanding situations than the L. So it was basically made as an export model for countries or even to be cheaper than the Lima version, right? And then they just made the P. So it was just the same as the J, but they had the subvariants that we're going to talk about. So for example, the P2 and P3 were introduced in the middle of the 70s with improved guidance electronics than the J, and a new rocket motor and an active optical fuse as well. Around 21,000 of them were built of these Ps and other stuff because they were made for export, so a lot of countries bought them. The P4 then is a more advanced one with all aspect capability with the technology developed for the Lima, and it is less maneuverable than the Lima and has less range than the Lima, but is still very, very much capable. So it would be a AIM-9J, but with a better rocket motor a little bit and an all aspect seeker, right? And then we have even the P5, which had better countermeasures. Obviously, the seeker on the Lima had a little bit of a IRCCM, but the P5 would mean that it had kind of the technology developed for the AIM-9M or the Mike. So it had better countermeasures against flares and other problems, you know, so very good. Still has the same engine, proximity fuse, TNT equivalent than the B. So it has the same energy and stuff like that as the B, but it had 40 degrees of gimbal limit and 16 degrees per second of tracking rate, together with a 20 to 22G limit depending on the version. Way more maneuverable than the B and the E. So very, very cool. We see a lot of these missiles, so very, very nice. And let's get going because the video is already 23 minutes. So yeah. Then we have the Lima and the Mike, the AIM-9L and the AIM-9M. In 1971, the US Navy and the USAF agreed to make a jointly development for the AIM-9L based on the H. And the objective was to be all aspect and be a dogfighting missile too. Had the new canard type, so you can see on the game the different canard type, a modified Mark 36 engine. This is the engine for the D, the G, and the H. So we had the same engine as the H, the G, and the D, but it was a little bit different, had a little bit more burn time and a little bit more energy. A new solid-state electronics guidance system and a control sections. Completely new argon-cooled indium antimonite seeker. So it has a completely new technology on the seeker. And it has a laser proximity fuse, improved warhead, and it was better than all the other Sidewinders ever made. The production started around 1978, around 3 years later than the initial production of the R60M, and like 3 to 4 years before the mass production of the R73. So you can feel that it is a missile between those two in technology, right? If you are to compare to the Russians. So it was better than the R60M, in a general sense. Depending on the situation, the R60M can be better, but in general, the AIM-9L will be better. And it was worse than the R73 because it was basically in the middle of that, right? Around 16,000 of them were built. Many countries, even in many countries like Japan and Germany. And the M was a further development of the L as well, replacing the L in the production line. It had a reduced rocket motor, improved guidance system, and a better IR-CCM than the L, which was still kind of limited, even though it was way better than not having it. The dilemma is what I mean. A better reliability, and the production started around 1982, around the same year as the R73 as well. With more than 7,000 built, there were some subtypes too, like the M1 until the M10. The M8 and the M9 are a little bit of a different one because they had better engines, better RCCM, better guidance, and yeah, and the M10 was a modification of the M9 to be used in the Super Hornet as well. So they were being developed and being improved. So the AIM-9L and the M, so they're basically the same missile. The difference is that the M would have a little bit of a better engine and more RCCM, IRCCM, so it would be better against these countermeasures and sun and background noise and stuff like that. And also it has a smokeless engine, but everything else is basically the same, the turning capabilities and stuff. They both had an improved rocket motor, as I said, from the original Mark 36. Initially it was 5.23 seconds of burn time, so it had more energy, a better proximity fuse and better explosive, 24 degrees of second of tracking rate, and a 40 degrees gimbal limit. The maneuverability is hard to know, because still a lot of the L's and M's are still classified, but the initial L's would be around 30 Gs and the M's would be around 40s. Some people say even 45 in the later M's. So yeah, very, very good missile. Longer range. The only problem with it in a dogfight is that it takes a while to accelerate compared to the R60M and the R73, but that's the only thing. Everything else, because of that, you can say that obviously the R73 has even the thrust vectoring and stuff like that, but the AIM-9M would have a lot more range, and the AIM-9L as well, so not a lot more range, but a lot more range than the R60M, and around the same range as the R73, but still, that was kind of the idea, was a different doctrine, so it was a different missile. It's hard to compare them because they are very different missiles. So yeah, there are some weird variants as well. So the Q, so the AIM-9Q, would be an M modernized, but it was probably cancelled or integrated as a M subvariant, never existed in full production. The R variant was a prototype with a much proved seeker for the M, tested from 1999 to 1992, but the project was cancelled due to the lack of funding as well. And the S is a stripped down M version for export without the IRCCM. It was sold to Turkey apparently, but I could not confirm. So if you see one of these other missiles, they are just not very used, or they was never used, or they're not commonly known because they're not in US service or something like that, right? But yeah, basically these are the missiles that we are going to see soonish in the game, okay? Then we have the later variant, the ultimate AIM-9, the AIM-9X. I had to talk a little bit about it as well. A lot of things are classified, so I don't know much about the performance of the aircraft, but still. It is the ultimate version of the Sidewinder. With the cancellation of the R version, they decided to make a dogfighting missile based on the M. Remember, the M, even though they are for dogfights, they take a while to accelerate, and they have a longer burn time to have longer ranges. So it's a different doctrine than an R60M, than an R73, for example. They even considered buying the AIM-132 as RAM, but it was dropped. And test firings of the AIM-9X started in 1998, and in September 2000, it entered in low-rate production. The first production X for evaluations were delivered in 2002. And in 2004, he entered full-rate production with, in 2008, having around 3,000 built already. He has the improved Mark 36 engine, so it has the same engines as the ODs, right? But it is improved and modernized, obviously. Warhead is the same from the M as well, but improved. But it had all new, brand new canard for lower drag and better use, especially in aircraft such as the F-22 and F-35, to be inside the base, right? It had to be a little bit smaller. And it uses a completely new guidance section with an IIR system. Instead of normal sensors, it uses literally images to see targets. So it's a very modern. I couldn't find much more information than that. I know a lot of people have information on that, but it's hard to actually confirm it because there's a lot of things that are just myths behind it. It has a jet vane steering system for agility, so it's a completely new missile with a lot of things still classified, as I said, and it will take a long time to be added to War Thunder if it's ever going to be added. So yeah, this would be the ultimate AIM-9X, the ultimate AIM-9, and the latest AIM-9 that we see. Okay, these are all the AIM-9s that we saw. As you see on this screen, we can see that all of them are here. So you see that the AIM-9A, recapping everything before the end of the video. The AIM-9A was the initial one, with the B being an improvement on aerodynamics. Then we had the Navy ones and the Air Force ones. So the Air Force ones, we had the AIM-9E, which is basically the same as the B, with a new seeker. The J and N and P, which are completely new missiles. Not completely new, they are improvements over the E, right? So new canards, new solid state electronics, new actuators, everything like that. We have the F, which is a modernization for the Europeans, for the B. We have the C, which is a semi-active version of for the Navy, together with the D, which have completely new engines, completely new electronics and stuff, together with the G, which is the same as the D, but with the slaving capabilities, the H being a little bit more reliable than the G, and having a little bit of a better computer to calculate stuff. AIM-9K never was produced, but it is a missile that we can talk about. We did talk about improvement of the H that they canceled. They decided to go for the L together with the Air Force, so they joined the USAF. It got basically the motors and the agility from each of the missiles and put it together in one, making it all aspect as well. The M would be a better version with better IRCCM and a smokeless engine from the L. We have the S, a stripped down version of the for export for the M. We have the R, which is a prototype that was never saw production for the M. We have the Q that probably saw service being a new subvariant for the M. And we have the AIM-9X being the new, developed in the 2000s. Very, very good missile, the best out there for the NATO. So yeah, this was it, guys, for the video. Basically, they're very, very good missiles, but they're they're completely different from Soviet doctrine. So on Soviet missiles like the R-3S, like the R-13M, like the R-60, other missiles, I'm going to probably make a video about the Russian IR missiles as well. They don't have one missile that was improved along the years, right? Like the US has. But it's still, they have other missiles that I can do the same type of video. Okay? So I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments if you think about, if you like the video or anything like that. And I see you guys on the next one. A very, very cool subject that I love to talk about. And yeah, I see you guys on the next one. And subscribe, and bye, guys. See you.